You're listening to the True Crime Nation podcast with Todd and Brian. If you're enjoying the show, email us at truecrimenation@outlook.com. Let's start the show. Welcome back. I'm Brian. Right over there with me is Todd. What's up, buddy?
Hey, man. How you doing today? How was your weekend?
Man, it was good. It was good. Not long enough or never long enough.
Right. Mine was a little less active, so I got to relax a little bit, which was nice. I've been busy, busy, as everyone else is probably too. But anyway, yeah, so here we are again talking about some craziness, some crimes, some scary, creepy, whatever.
Yeah. We got a good one tonight, too. What do we got going on?
Well, we talked about before about serial killers and people like that back in the day, you know, Jack the Ripper. How long did this begin? When did this start?
Yeah.
What made this? What is it in people's heads? Has it been there all the time? Is it something that's...
Have there always been a serial killer?
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this story tonight takes place in the 19th century, which is 1800s something. Maybe a little 1870, I believe, was the time frame. So yeah, pretty early.
1870, yep. Right after the war.
Tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about a family named the Benders.
The Bloody Benders.
They lived in Kansas. A very interesting family, and I haven't done too much homework on this, just a little bit. So
Me either, so we're doing this off the cuff tonight.
Sounds good. That's how we like to do these. We learn as our listeners learn.
That's right.
So just to kind of touch base on a little bit, we've got obviously some printouts here. We're going to look at some stuff here. It says in the 19th century, Kansas was a bloody place, especially before the Civil War, as free soldiers and slavery advocates duked it out over control of new territory. Though most of us know of Dodge City's wicked ways, the deadly gunfight of the Daltons in Coffeyville, and many outlaws and gunfighters who spent time in the Sunflower State, few aware of family of mass murderers living a supposed quiet life near the small town of Cherryvale. I haven't looked on a map to see where Cherryvale is, but so we're talking back in the day, Dodge City, the cowboy era, the guns, the gunfights, the OK Corral, that whole kind of time frame, huh?
Right. Yep. Back right after the Civil War.
Just after the Civil War ended and the United States government moved the Osage Indians from Labette County in southeast Kansas to the new Indian Territory that would later become the state of Oklahoma. The vacated land was then made available to homesteaders who, for the most part, were a group of hardworking pioneers farming the area's softly rolling hills and windswept prairies. In 1970, 5 families of spiritualists settled in the western Labette County, about 7 miles northeast of where Cherryvale would be plotted a year later. One of these families was the Benders, comprised of John Bender Sr., his wife Almira, son John Jr., and daughter Kate. A cult-like group, the families chose from several available claims and began to make their homes. John Bender Sr. chose a 160-acre section on the western slopes of the mounds that today continue to bear their name. Okay, so it talks about their homestead, how they're coming into play here, how they acquired their land, their et cetera, kind of boring. Let's get into the good stuff here. It says his son chose a piece of land just north of his father's. However, he never lived on this claim nor made any improvements. Family built.
So essentially, they built a little building, and it had a store in it, and they sold goods to travelers that were coming by.
Yep.
And they offered overnight stays for people. You know, supposedly a safe place.
Okay.
Air quotes. So
yeah, it says a crude sign was hung above the front door that advertised groceries to the many travelers. Provided a safe overnight resting place for the strangers. This is how they lured them in, I bet you.
Yep, that's exactly how they did. Pretty smart. Smart.
I mean, it's hard enough these days thinking
taking advantage of people that are heading west.
Yeah, I know. So I'm saying it's hard enough these days to not get taken advantage of, period, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But back then
yeah, I know.
When you really needed help.
Yeah. Especially people who are, traveling. They're coming from the East Coast or whatever, and they're heading out west to start a new life and run into these people.
Yeah. I mean, that to them was like us traveling and staying in a hotel. You don't go to a hotel and expect to get murdered. I mean,
right. Yeah.
It's possible, right? Obviously, but you don't do
anything's
that.
Possible, yeah.
So let's move on here.
Keeping mostly to themselves, the Benders appeared to simply be struggling homesteaders who worked hard to earn their living like the other area pioneers. Immigrating from Germany, John Bender Sr. was 60 years old when he arrived in the area. His wife, about 55, standing over 6 feet tall. John was a giant of a man. Can you imagine that? Being 6 feet tall, being a giant of a man.
6 feet tall back then. He was 60 years old.
Yeah. Because of his piercing black eyes set deeply under huge bushy brows, earned him the nickname of Old Beetle-Browed John. His ruddy face, mostly covered by a heavy beard, sullen expression, and long hair often led to him being described as a wild and woolly-looking man.
Mm-hmm.
Both John and his raw-boned wife spoke with such guttural accents that few people could understand them. Mrs. Bender, a heavyset woman, was so unfriendly and had such sinister eyes that her neighbors began to call her a she-devil to add to her fierce look. Wow. Ma Bender also claimed to be a medium who could speak with the dead and boiled herbs and roots that she declared could be used to cast charms and wicked spells. Her husband and son were said to have feared her as she ran the household with an iron hand. Who do you think the mastermind of that situation
Ma Bender.
was? Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It says here, John Bender Jr. was a tall, slender man of 25 who was handsome with auburn hair and a mustache. Speaking English fluently with a German accent, he was said to have been social, but was prone to laughing aimlessly, which led people to think him as a half-wit. It's kind of creepy in itself.
Yeah, no kidding.
Daughter Kate was the friendliest of the bunch, speaking good English with just a slight accent and bore cultivated social skills. A beautiful girl of about 23, she was quick to laugh and to talk to strangers. She and her brother often attended Sunday school at a nearby Harmony Grove and were readily accepted in the community. Kate was a self-proclaimed healer and psychic, giving lectures on spiritualism and conducted seances. She claimed to possess psychic powers, including the ability to communicate with the dead. Distributing circulars that proclaimed her skills, including supernatural powers and the ability to cure illnesses and infirmities, she soon found the lecture circuit profitable. Okay.
Interesting.
The petite auburn-haired beauty had a desire for notoriety and often advocated free love and justification for murder in her lectures.
Well, how about that?
Along with her desire for fame, she also craved wealth and position. Though her beauty and social skills gained her popularity with the locals, her actions became to cause them to say that she was satanic. It was to be this diminutive Bender family member that would take the most of the blame for what was soon to be found out to be this infamous family. Okay, so the daughter was kind of crazy. They're all kind of crazy, apparently.
Yeah, well, it pretty much have to be.
Maybe
they were Germans, so most Germans are crazy.
Maybe a little inbreeding going on. Who knows what the hell?
Not trying to stereotype anybody.
No, we're not. Not at all. Is that where they came from? Were they from Germany? You just say?
Yeah. Yep. Straight from the old country.
So it says, when the Benders opened their store and inn in 1871, many travelers would stop for a meal or supplies. However, some of those men who frequently carried large sums of cash with the intention of settling, buying stock, or purchasing a claim began to go missing.
See, there you go. They're just trying to go out west and start a new life and find their fortune. And these people...
Yeah, that's sad, dude. That's like if we were going to retire and something happened to us, you know?
Yeah.
When friends and family began to look for them, they could trace them as far back as Big Hill Country of southeast Kansas before they could find no trace of the lost traveler. So yeah, back then, I mean, you had what, mail carried by horseback?
Yeah, I mean, there was no, no internet, no computers, no anything to keep track of people. I mean, if somebody goes missing, you're not going to know for weeks.
Yeah, like you said before, back in the day, it was easier to be a serial killer than it is nowadays. If you're one today, It's very hard because it's very easy to get caught with technology.
Right. But we're so connected now.
But back then, they didn't have that.
Right.
The guy says, I just checked into the Bender Inn, writing this little note to let you know I'm okay. Write you in a few days.
Yeah, might not get it for a month.
And they don't get it for a month, and they don't get none after that.
Right.
And the guy's been dead for 2 months, so... I'm interested to hear why, if they killed these guys for money, or if it was for more than that.
I'm guessing that was just like a bonus. I think they just did it to do it.
Yeah, maybe. The first few missing travelers did not raise an overall alarm in the area, as it was not uncommon during these days for men to simply continue their journey westward. However, as more time passed, the disappearances became more frequent. By the spring of 1873, the region had become strife with rumors, and travelers began to avoid the trail. So, even back then, they were kind of getting an idea that people were
Right.
coming
Word
up
spreads.
missing. I'm going out west. My family's staying here. I'm going to claim us some land, build us a cabin, and I'll bring you guys out. And they
Right.
wouldn't hear from that person or said
Be
person
months.
for a long
Yeah.
time, even if the person decided to write. It could go, they could be a couple years and the guy shows back up. Okay, let's go. I've got it settled, Well, I don't know if that's how it worked. Maybe he didn't do that, but regardless, guys just trying to make a life for themselves.
Right. When neighboring communities started to make slanderous insinuations, the Osage Township called a meeting held at the Harmony Grove Schoolhouse in March to see what, if anything, could be done. About 75 people attended the gathering, including both Bender men.
Okay. Cover up.
So those two guys, yeah. So they're going, hey, we'll help you look for these people. Hey, we're upstanding citizens of the community.
They were probably saying, well, if we don't show up, we're going to look like,
Right. Exactly. Ma Bender probably made them.
Yeah. What else you got over there?
The discussion began regarding the 10 people who were reported missing, including a well-known independent physician named William H. York. Ooh. With the full realization that there truly was a major problem in their township, the group decided to search every farmstead between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek. When most of the attendees volunteered to have their premises searched, the Benders remained silent.
Okay.
So they weren't volunteering.
Nope. Interesting.
Sometime later, Billy Toll, a neighbor of the Benders, noticed that the Bender Inn was abandoned and their farm animals unfed. Toll reported the news to Leroy F. Dick. I'm sorry, that's an unfortunate name.
It is.
The township trustee and a search party was soon formed, which included Dr. York's brother, Colonel A.M. York of Fort Scott. When the men arrived at the property, they found the cabin empty of food, clothing, and personal possessions. They were also met by a terrible smell inside the abandoned inn. A trap door, nailed shut, was discovered in the floor of the cabin.
So they took off, huh?
Well, I'm guessing they're going to find a grisly sight down there in that trap door.
They hightailed it out of there.
Yeah, they did. They got the hell out. They're like, ooh, we got to go. The jig is up.
All right.
Prying it open, the men found a 6-foot deep hole that was filled with clotted blood, causing the terrible odor. However, there were no bodies in the hole. Finally, the men physically moved the entire cabin to the side and began to search beneath. But no bodies were found there either. Continuing, they began to dig around the cabin, especially in an area the Benders had utilized as a vegetable garden and orchard. At the side of a freshly stirred depression in the earth, they found the first body, buried head down, with its feet scarcely covered. The corpse was that of Dr. William H. York, his skull bludgeoned and his throat cut from ear to ear.
Jesus.
Damn.
They didn't. They just barely even buried the guy.
Damn near cut his head off and then bashed it in.
They just think that they're going to pick these guys up, traveling through. No one's going to think two things about it. And
yeah, I mean, think about it. Like we said, they're just traveling westward. I mean, and again, people aren't going to hear from them for a month or so.
This is a perfect example of, especially while traveling, be on your hand, be on alert. Always consider
be aware
the fact
of your surroundings.
That there are, like we say, monsters out there, and people will do shit to you.
That's right.
At the least most expected time. They make you feel safe. They make you feel secure, and it can happen. You've got to have some form of protection, be it a gun, whatever.
Absolutely.
But anyway.
The digging continued the next day, and 9 other bodies and numerous dismembered body parts were found, including a woman and a little girl. Man.
Jesus.
The burial site was christened Hell's Half Acre, and another brother of Dr. York, a lawyer and state senator residing in Independence, offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to the Bender's family arrest. On May 17th, Governor Thomas Osborne added to the amount by offering $2,000 reward for the apprehension of all 4. So $3,000, that's a lot of money back then.
These guys they didn't care. I mean, killing a woman and her daughter.
Yeah.
Do you think they let people...
I don't know what the motive with that was, because, they didn't have much.
You would think, unless they had a lot of money, or it was just, they got, like you said, they just wanted to, they got something like do it. It wasn't for the money.
They just got their jollies off of doing it. Word of the gruesome murder spread fast, and thousands of people flocked to the site, including newspaper reporters from as far away as New York and Chicago. The Bender cabin was ripped apart by gruesome souvenir hunters, right down to the bloody bricks that lined the cellar. People are so fucking weird, man.
Yeah, I wanted to talk real quick before we go on. That hole in the floor that they found was filled with
clotted blood.
Clotted blood.
Yeah.
What was that?
I don't know if that's maybe where they put him and killed him, or I don't know. That had to have been a torture chamber or whatever.
Just let him drain out there?
For most of them, yeah. Sounds like it.
Weird. This is back in 1800s, man. Can you imagine what people do nowadays? I mean, it's disgusting.
Bit by bit, the story of the Benders was pieced together. The Benders were obviously not what they appeared. In fact, they weren't even a true family. In air quotes, family. The only ones related were Ma and Kate Bender.
Interesting.
What? When the visitor stopped in for a meal, they were seated at a table with their back to a large canvas that separated the inn from the living quarters. Then Kate would begin to charm the men with her social skills, flirting or revealing her psychic gifts. As the men gave their full attention to the alluring Kate, Pa and John Bender, hiding behind the canvas, would strike the unsuspecting traveler in the skull with a hammer. Ma Bender and Kate would then rifle the body for money, pushing him through the trapdoor into the hole of the cabin, where Kate would slit his throat. During the night, the body would then be buried in the garden behind the house. So yeah, that's where they did it. They shoved him in the hole, let him die there. So that's where all the blood came from. Their downfall was the murder of a father and daughter named Launcher, and that of Dr. William York, who had come looking for the missing pair. In the winter of 1872, Mr. Launcher and his daughter had left Independence for Iowa, but were never heard from again. In the spring of 1873, Dr. York took it upon himself to go looking for the Launchers, stopping at the homesteads along the trail to ask questions. Though he reached Fort Scott unscathed and started to return to Independence about March 8th, he never reached home.
So he was out looking for other people.
So he would look for those two, the father and daughter.
Oh, jeez.
And on his way back, ran into the Benders.
Well, he was close.
Yeah, Dr. York had 2 brothers, one living in Fort Scott and the other in Independence. Both knew of his travel plans. And when he failed to return home, an all-out search began for the missing doctor. Colonel A.M. York, leading a contingency of some 50 men, began to question every travel along the trail and to stop at the area homesteads. One of those places was the Bender Inn. The Benders tried to help by admitting that Dr. York had stopped at their place, but convinced the search party that he had left and was probably waylaid by Indians.
Okay.
And blamed everything on Indians back then.
Uh-huh.
Even Kate, with her clairvoyant abilities, attempted to search for the missing doctor to throw any suspicion off herself. Well, they must have been pretty convincing people.
I was going to say, these people were pretty, had some trickery to them for sure. I mean...
Yeah, so they were pretty good at what they did, I guess.
Yeah. Wow.
killing at least 10 people.
Again,
Right?
back in the day, to have people like that, you just would not know it. That would go on.
I know. You wouldn't think. Yeah, because I don't think that was who knows? It might have been more common than we know. I mean, who knows how many of those went unsolved?
How many were even known about, reported?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There could have been a lot that weren't even reported.
Yep. After Colonel York's visit and the meeting at the Harmony Grove schoolhouse, the Bender family fled. It was only a few days later that the homestead was found abandoned, and the search party began to discover the grisly remains of the bodies. The diggers were astounded to find what would become known as one of America's first mass murder burial grounds, as body after body was uncovered. 10 bodies were found in the Bender's apple orchard, including Dr. York and the people he had been searching for.
Oh,
Mr. Launcher and his daughter. Wow. Just 7 or 8 years old.
That's crazy.
More gruesomely, though, the little girl's body was found to have multiple injuries. None of them would have caused death, and it was speculated that the poor lass may have been buried alive. My God, man. Of the discovery of her remains, the Kansas City Times reported, the little girl was probably 8 years of age, had long, sunny hair, and some traces of beauty on a countenance that was not yet entirely disfigured by decay. One arm was broken. The breastbone had been driven in. The right knee had been wrenched from its socket, and the leg doubled up under the body. Nothing like this sickening series of crimes had ever been recorded in the whole history of the country.
Jeez.
A child.
These guys were sick, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like the fact that we find these stories that haven't been really heard of, that we like to bring to light to these people, and I don't really know how serious some of these are, but these guys were disgustingly sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To kill 10 people, period, but then to do that to a little girl.
Yeah.
That's
they were all doing this together.
Yeah. Yeah. Other bodies were found in the garden were those of Henry Mackenzie's mutilated remains. 3 men by the names of Ben Brown, W.F. McCrotty, and John Geary, as well as an unidentified male and female. Johnny Boyle's body was found in the well. Dismembered parts of several other victims were also discovered, but could never be identified. Well, because they didn't have DNA stuff back then.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did they even know who these people were?
4 other bodies with crushed skulls and slit throats were also found outside the property in Drum Creek on the surrounding prairie.
Jeez, man.
Yeah, they got a little picture here of...
Yeah, we're digging up where
yeah, and they got their names of where they found everybody.
Yeah.
Weird. Well, the ones they knew of anyway.
That's crazy.
For all these deaths, the Benders gained only about $4,600, 2 teams of horses and wagons, a pony, and a saddle. Because some of the travelers were carrying nothing of value, it is widely speculated that the Benders killed simply for the bloody thrill of it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just...
I don't know what $4,600 was like.
Psychopathic whack jobs. That's a lot of money, actually.
I mean, back then, that was a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But you would think keeping horses and wagons, that's going to throw you off. People are going to be like...
Plus, people would notice that.
You would think they would know. People who know these people would come looking for them and be like, oh, that's their horse. Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm. Especially saddles. Saddles were like a huge thing.
Personalized, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah. As word of the grisly murder spread, more and more travelers came forward to tell their own stories of narrow escape, including one gentleman by the name of William Pickering. When he refused to sit with his back to the canvas because of its disgusting stains, Pickering said that Kate Bender threatened him with a knife, at which point he fled the premises.
Oh.
A Catholic priest said that he too fled when he saw one of the Bender men concealing a large hammer.
A Catholic priest was in there, huh?
Well, how come none of these guys reported this stuff?
Yeah.
It was just not did they just not do that back then? Or obviously they had suspicions. I mean, they could have said something.
You would think, especially a priest.
Yeah. After following a fresh trail of wagon tracks, a search party found the Benders had gone to the town of nearby Thayer. some 12 miles to the north. There, they purchased tickets on the northbound Leavenworth, Lawrence, and Galveston train to Humboldt. Several days later, the Benders' team and wagon were found a short distance away. The horses nearly starved.
See that on top of it, they just leave their animals behind just to starve to death. I mean, I guess they could have put out a bunch
chances
of
are
food
they
for
weren't
them.
theirs anyway. Those are probably some of the stolen ones.
That's true.
Upon further investigation, Captain James B. Ransom, the train's conductor, said that John Jr. and Kate disembarked at Chanute and took the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas Railroad south to the Red River County near Denison, Texas, which was then the terminus of the railroad, which is where it ended. Allegedly, the pair then fled to a tough outlaw colony along the border of Texas and New Mexico. Meanwhile, Ma and Pa Bender continued on the train north to Kansas City, where it was believed they transferred to a train headed to St. Louis.
Split up.
Yeah.
Chase you.
That's probably what they just said. Hey, you go that way, we'll go this way.
Yep.
They can't catch us all. Attempts to capture the bloodthirsty family were immediately made by both law officers and vigilantes alike. Bounty hunters.
I love it.
Though no one ever collected on the rewards offered, rumors began to fly of several parties who had captured and killed the Benders. One vigilante group claimed to have shot down the men and Ma Bender and burned Kate alive as the witch they believed her to be.
Okay. She should.
Good. I hope that's true. That's how it should have ended.
Yeah.
Another group claimed they had caught the Benders while escaping to the south and lynched them before throwing their bodies in the river. Yet another group claimed to have killed the Benders during a gunfight and buried their bodies on the prairie. Well, I hope the first one is true.
Even back then, rumors,
Yep. However, none of these tales were ever confirmed nor bodies found, so most thought that the Benders had managed to escape. For years, sightings of Ma Bender and Kate were reported, and in 1889, 2 women were actually extradited from Michigan on the charge. Though the pair were jailed, the case was eventually dropped for lack of evidence. So they might have had them.
They don't know it was them or not?
That's what I get from that.
How would they not know?
I don't know. Well, again, back then they didn't have, fingerprint wasn't an exact science. There was no DNA. Of the family, Pa Bender was actually found to have been a man named John Flickering from either Germany or Holland. Though he allegedly committed suicide in 1884 in Lake Michigan, others believe that Ma and Kate murdered him because he had fled Cherryville with all the cash and valuables they had taken from their victims.
So no one really knows what happened to these people.
No.
This isn't unsolved.
This is pretty much unsolved, yeah. Ma Bender was born Elmira Meek in the Adirondacks and married as a teenager to a man named George Griffith. After bearing him a dozen children, including Kate, Mr. Griffith suddenly died. Some said of a bad place on his head. A bad place on his head, resembling a dent that might be made with a hammer. Afterwards, she reportedly remarried several times, killing those husbands too, as well as 3 of her older children, so they could not testify against her.
What?
Damn. What?
Ma Bender was So I wonder why she didn't kill Pa Bender.
Wow. So Kate must have been willing to.
Yeah, because she didn't want her mom to kill her.
Yeah. It just gets weirder and weirder.
It does.
John Jr. was actually found to have been a man named John Gebhardt. His habit of laughing aimlessly was what led him to being described as a half-wit, though many, afterward, believed this was simply a ruse to disguise his clever nature.
Mm-hmm.
Though most were led to believe that John and Kate were sister and brother, others said that they sometimes passed as man and wife. The two were known to have had a relationship, and further tales abound that when Kate became pregnant, they would simply bash in the baby's head once it was born.
I hope that's not true.
After the Benders' escape, one detective who had closely followed all the leads said that he had traced Gebhardt to the outlaw country along the Texas-New Mexico border, where he had found that the criminal had died of apoplexy. Yeah, I hope that part's not true. That's just ugh.
Well, as many rumors as stuff has come up with this case alone, I hope that's not true as well. But you don't know. These people were sick. Sounds like they do about anything. That
Yeah.
whole smacking them in the head and slitting the throat thing, that's kind of like, that's how they kill cattle.
Yeah,
They
pretty much.
knock them out with a stun thing, and then they slit their throat and they
And
just
slit
bleed
their
out.
throat. Yep. Kate was the fifth child of Ma Bender and was born as Eliza Griffith. At some point, she married and went by the name Sarah Eliza Davis. Allegedly, while working at the Bender Inn, she also earned her keep as a prostitute, adding an additional amount to the traveler's bill for the privilege of laying with her. In the end, it was Kate who was primarily blamed for the numerous bloody murders that even at her young age was the inspiration for the crime.
She probably tried to get a feel for how much money they had.
Right, exactly. Being the hookah.
It makes you wonder how many people they didn't kill,
Yeah, how many actually did get away?
You got to think they couldn't have killed every person that come in there.
Well, you wouldn't think. They probably got most of them, though. Well, the tales of what happened to the Benders can only be speculated as to their accuracy. The fact that 10 bodies were found on the property is not disputed. Other corpses found in the area, as well as the many mysterious disappearances of other lonely travelers, led the locals to believe that the Benders actually killed more than 20 people.
I believe it.
So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, how long were they doing it? There's absolutely very believable they could get away with that.
Yep.
The sensational tales and rumors of the Benders continued well into the 20th century, but as to what actually happened to them remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the Old West.
Back in the day, you would think sooner or later people get caught, for them to be able to split up like they did and get the hell out of there and not get caught.
I mean, well, yeah, because again, they didn't have, the internet. They probably didn't even have pictures of these people, so other than these drawings that are on this thing.
A lot of people didn't go to the dentist. They didn't really have dentists back then too, probably as much. How would they identify people? Yep, that's him. Looks like him.
Yeah, right.
Other than like a birthmark or something like that. How would you know?
Yeah, because they didn't have dental x-rays and stuff, so I don't know. Yeah, probably tattoos probably weren't a big thing back then. So I don't know.
Did they have tattoos back then?
I'm sure they did.
Do you think the Indians started tattoos?
Oh, tattoos go way back. Way back.
I've got a little bit of excerpt to this story I also found on it, which is kind of interesting.
Okay, cool.
This guy had posted, it's a story called Escaping Naked, and it says, I listened to a story last night from my grandfather, Emerson Smalley, about the Benders and their supposed end. His family rose from Cherryvale, Kansas, and the story involves a group of men that found the Benders and were in a gunfight with them, one of whom was a judge that lost part of his ear in the gun battle. My grandfather, who is approaching 80 years old, is always full of great stories, but he assured me that his father, who had passed this on to him, knew of what really happened. When his father, my great-grandfather, Frank Smalley, was a boy, he was hiding in the hayloft of the family barn when he overheard a group of men below talking and laughing. Frank's father, Jesse Smalley, along with several men, were joking with the local judge, teasing him about his missing ear. As the boy listened, the men continued to talk, relating the tale of how the judge had lost his ear. It was a story about the infamous Benders and about one man who got away. The unnamed man was evidently one of the many who made the mistake of stopping at the Bender Inn. Like others, he sat at the table. He was hit over the head. The Benders stripped him of his clothes and went to bury him, when the man suddenly awoke. The Benders were, no doubt, surprised to find the man wasn't dead. Somehow, he managed to escape, next appearing naked in the middle of the night at Jesse Smalley's doorstep. Telling the story of his near death, Jesse quickly retold it to a nearby doctor and judge who formed a vigilante group to go after the Benders.
So what came of that?
Says, however, by the time the men arrived at the Benders' cabin very early the next morning, they found the Benders gone. Then they began to follow a wagon trail left by the Benders that took them down as far as near Tulsa, Oklahoma, before circling back into Kansas. So they followed wagon trails from these guys' house, wagon wheel trails. At a fork of the Fall and Vidigris rivers, they found the Benders with their wagon backed up against a fallen tree with a canvas over it for shelter. When the vigilante group approached, the Benders fired on them, at which time the judge lost part of his ear to a flying bullet. Wow.
Yeah.
Tried to take his head off. In retaliation, the vigilantes killed all of the members of the Bender family, buried them where they died, and took the wagon to town where they left it. I have heard my grandfather tell of this story since I was a boy, and Grandpa swears that this is the real story of what happened to the Benders. Fact or fiction, no one really knows. But I've always enjoyed the tale and hope you will as well. Today, there are Somali descendants that continue to live in the Nadosha and Cherryvale area.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It always seems like there's one that gets away,
another,
you know?
Yeah, another legend.
I wonder why they didn't slit this guy's throat. Did they just think a hit in the hammer was good enough?
They must have thought the hammer was good enough. Yeah.
They were probably thinking the blood's getting too messy. We throw him down that hole, and this is getting ridiculous. Let's just hit him and kill him in the hammer. Just get a better whack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, could be.
So maybe that's what happened to him. We don't really know, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's 4 or 5 rumors that we just read. So,
yep. Who knows?
Who knows how they met their end? But
it was a good, interesting story. I'm glad we brought it on here today.
It was, yeah. I'm glad we did that. I like doing stuff like that. Our listener sent that one to us. So
yeah, that's right. Shout out to Matt.
You guys, yeah, thanks, Matt. So if anybody else has some ideas for some interesting stories, send them to us. We'll dig into them and we'll share them with you.
We're trying to, stay away from the ones that have been covered over and over again, bring new ones to light. There's a lot more craziness that goes on out there that people really, that they realize, you've got all the Ted Bundys and the Dahmers and the John Wayne Gacy's, but this has been going on for a long time from a lot of different.
Yeah, there's also other stuff that's been going on that is more obscure that people haven't heard of. Like this one, I didn't hear this one until Matt sent it to us.
Yeah, me either. So if you guys have anything you want us to cover, let us know. Shoot us an email at truecrimenation@outlook.com and let us know what you guys want to hear. All right, my friend, thanks for hanging out. This is a good story. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, that was fun. I always love learning stuff like this.
Me too, as gory as it can be.
Yep.
Appreciate it. And everyone, thanks for listening. And remember,
monsters are real.